Hey, it's Brandon from insiderschool.com, and welcome to this mini course on time management. Inside, I want to share with you 7 specific things you can do immediately to become more productive and get more out of every day. Real quick, let me tell you how this course came to be. When I was in college, I was getting 2 educations at the same time. The first was by professors, and the second was by the world's smartest people. And it all happened because I started reading books in college. It was actually one book, and I was so frustrated that everything inside was pretty much the opposite of what I was learning in my classes. So I went to the dean's office and said, I feel like I'm getting an outdated education, and she said, we're working on it. And the point is that the education system that we go through is broken. We don't learn the right things, we're not taught the right way, and we can't afford it. Even if we can in money, we can't afford all the time we're putting in it and not putting in learning other things that really matter. That's why I really started reading a lot of books, now over 1,000 since January 2012, and I've discovered that anyone who's excelled in any area of life spent their entire life discovering things we never learned in school. And instead of learning these things in school that we can apply to our life immediately, we memorize facts so we can write them on a piece of paper. The first real takeaway I just wanted to share with you right here is that I believe that a real education comes from application, not memorization. That's why I made insiderschool.com, which is all about learning the things these people discovered in a way you can apply to your life. And that's also why I wanted to make this course, because one of the things we're never taught in school is time management. That's why I originally made my full course on time management called How to Double Your Productivity by Tomorrow Morning. What I wanted to do here, just to share this with even more people, is share with you 7 specific things from that course that you can apply immediately to get a result. Also, you can probably tell I'm obsessed with learning things you'll never learn in school. I spend a ton of time reading, and as a free bonus to this course, I want to share with you the actionable takeaways from the best books I read in real time. So if I read an amazing book tomorrow about negotiation or persuasion or time management or health, relationships, success, or anything that I think you'll really like, I'll send you an email every week or two. And it's 100% free. Just want to add more value to you through this course. To join, just go to insiderschool.com/mini-time. So thanks for joining the course. I'm so excited to share this with you. Let's start by completely redefining what managing your time well means. One of my greatest teachers in life has been Seneca, who was a Roman philosopher who died 2,000 years ago. And I wanted to share something with you in this video that he said in his book on the shortness of life that redefines how you look at your time. This is what he said. He said, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. He said life is long enough and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. This is a quote that I really thought a lot about, and not even just the whole thing, but particularly the last 2 words. Well invested. What does it mean for your time to be well invested? We all spend time, we all use time, we all waste time, but think about it. How many people invest their time well? Just like somebody invests their money, they put it in the stock market, they put it in real estate, they invest in assets. People that manage their time well invest their time. That means they spend their time in things that will pay them a return either immediately or in the future, in either wisdom, in health, in money, in relationships, in peace of mind, in something tangible that they can get. And this redefines time management. Time management is not managing time so you can compartmentalize things. It's not using time so you get everything done in a day. It means you invest your time in a way that will give you a return. Anything that doesn't give you a return is time wasted. Anything that does is time management. That's the framework I want to give you in this course. And I hope you can start looking at time as something that is to be invested and not just something that needs to be used. In the next section, I want to share with you the 7 specific things that you can do to become more productive, taken from my course, How to Double Your Productivity by Tomorrow Morning. Before I do, I want to share with you a big time management obstacle that I want you to avoid, and how avoiding this is a major key to you having the productivity that you want. And the obstacle is this: having to think in real time. It's having to think the day of, what is it that I'm going to work on? If you're always thinking, what do I need to be doing next? What do I need to be doing now? Then, first of all, it's a huge drain of mental energy. We all only have a limited amount of willpower. We all only have a limited amount of mental capacity. And if we're wasting it on what do I need to do now or what do I need to do next, you're taking away energy that could be used to do productive things. But also, it's a huge waste of time because all these things can be figured out beforehand. So the answer is rituals. The answer is routine. The answer is having a framework that your day is set up in, and a framework for what you work on that gives you predictable returns, so you don't have to think about those things, and then your only job is executing the framework, not every day building a new framework from scratch. For example, I've spent months, maybe even years, refining my framework, and because of that, I know what my morning looks like. I know what my afternoon looks like. I know what I'm going to be working on, and I know what work gives me the highest return. And some people even told me, look, that's boring. You can't live in routine. And maybe there's some truth to that, but there's more truth in the fact that routine brings freedom. Think about this. Think about someone who wants to use an axe to chop down a tree. If that person goes and hits the axe against the tree one time, that won't do anything. They need to do it over and over and over at the same place, at the same tree to have any result. And that's what a framework is. The opposite of that is hitting one tree and then moving to another tree and then moving to another tree and moving to another tree, which is how most people use their time, especially when they come up with a new framework every time. So I really encourage you to come up with a ritual, come up with a framework you can use that will give you the highest return on your time, that will give you a predictable return on your time. And that's what these 7 things that I want to share with you are all about. That's what the rest of the course is devoted to. So let's jump right into it. The most important ritual you can put in place is your morning ritual. Because if you get up in the morning and do things that get you feeling great to make the most out of the day ahead, you'll be way more productive that day. Imagine the difference between that and your alarm just going off in the morning, snoozing 3 times, rolling out of bed, eating something quickly, and then heading out the door in a half daze. When you have a morning ritual, you get fired up and in the right mindset to go after what you want to get done that day. For this reason alone, it's a must. The time you invest by doing this first instead of jumping straight to work will pay you huge returns in productivity. But there's an even more important reason to do this. You see, Hal Elrod, who wrote the book, The Miracle Morning, which is all about setting up a morning ritual, said that we think to achieve more, we need to do more. But in reality, to achieve more, we need to become more. When you become more, you achieve more by doing less. So the even more important benefit of your morning ritual is personal development. You're investing that time not just for the day, but for your life. It's like Jim Rohn, the great speaker, said, income seldom exceeds personal development. Success is something you attract by the person you become. So you want to invest this first part of the day in things that get you in the right state of mind, and things that, if done again and again, help you become the person you can become. Here's how Hal Elrod recommends breaking your morning ritual down. He describes it by the acronym SAVERS. He says to start by some sort of silence or meditation first off to get centered, and then affirmations, followed by visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing, which is a fancy word for writing in a journal. Now, you don't have to do all of these things, but here is what I'd recommend doing as a bare minimum. Firstly, exercise. You want to invest this time in getting strong, healthy, and more importantly, feeling awake and energized for the day ahead. This can be walking out the door and going for a walk. It could be 10 minutes on a rebounder, or it could be a full workout. But even just 10 to 20 minutes first thing in the morning is enough. Next is reading your purpose out loud with enthusiasm. You've written down your purpose, and now you want to remind yourself, and not only remind yourself, but get excited about going after your vision and your purpose that day. And lastly, visualize. You want to visualize a scene where you've achieved your purpose, and you want to play that movie in your mind. But also visualize your day ahead. Visualize the day going perfectly. Visualize how you're going to be productive. Visualize how you're going to go about getting everything done and how you're going to avoid distractions. Roy Williams, who wrote the book The Wizard of Ad, said that the first step to doing something is seeing it in your mind. And whatever you want to get done for the day, see yourself doing it as part of your ritual. Now, also ask yourself, is there anything else that you want to add that will help you toward being the person you want to become? I do recommend starting as simple as possible, but if there is something else you want to add it in there as well. And then most importantly, write it down and start tomorrow morning. The most important thing I learned in college wasn't anything I learned in class. It was how I learned to study. Because while everyone else spent hours studying while checking Facebook and going on their phones, I would get in the zone. You see, in the book Flow, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi talks about the psychology of optimal experience. He talks about the state of being fully engaged in what you're doing, where you feel like you lose sense of time and where the work you do feels effortless. And he calls this the flow state. Other people sometimes call it getting in the zone. But can you see how being in that state would exponentially increase your productivity? The problem is most of us rarely experience it, and if we do, it's by accident. But assuming you are working on something that excites you, like we talked about earlier, the biggest key to getting in this state is working in chunks of uninterrupted time. That means picking one and only one thing to work on, putting your phone on Do Not Disturb, which I do, or turning it off, and working for a predefined amount of time, giving it all your mental power with zero interruptions and zero multitasking. This one simple thing is the biggest game changer for productivity. Peter Drucker, who's the most famous management thinker ever, recommended working in chunks of 2 hours at a time or more, but you don't have to go to that extreme. What is important, though, is that you do work in chunks of uninterrupted time. I personally work in chunks of either 50 minutes at a time or 90 minutes at a time, but let's just keep this simple. So first of all, buy an electronic timer. You want to start working by the clock. And if you use your phone as a timer, that's not an option because that would just be a distraction. You'll check your phone, you'll see, oh, I have this text, let me respond, and so on. So you don't want to do that. Next, decide a predetermined amount of time that you're going to work in. You can do 50 minutes with 10-minute breaks. You can do 90 minutes with 20 or 30-minute breaks or something else. For now, let's just start with 45 minutes straight and with 15-minute breaks just to get started. You can then change this amount of time at any point for however long makes sense for you, but I'd rather start with less time straight since most people usually interrupt themselves about every 3 minutes when they work. And by the way, there was a study that showed it takes over 23 minutes to get back in the zone after an interruption, assuming you were in the zone in the first place. So that really goes to show how important it is to really get in the zone and stay in the zone, not interrupting yourself and not letting anybody else interrupt you as well. You really need to defend this time and cut off all possible distractions, namely email, phone, or anybody who could potentially interrupt you. So when you start working for the day, commit to working by the timer. Put 45 minutes on the timer and work for 45 minutes straight. And then when that's done, put the timer for 15 minutes and take a 15-minute break. When you work, you should work on things, by the way, that will pay you a return in your work life. But what about during your breaks? You see, most people, their idea of a break is let me go on Facebook or do something that pays no return, but you really want your breaks to be high quality. You can even go so far to say that the quality of your work is determined by the quality of your break, because unless you feel refreshed and enthusiastic, you're not going to be able to give it your all when you work. So if you invest this break time in things that make you feel refreshed, and more importantly, even maybe investing this time to again become the person you can be, like Hal Elrod talked about, you're making the best use of this time. So maybe for one of these breaks, for example, you meditate. Maybe for another, you go for a walk. We'll talk about organizing all your breaks and work time and so forth a little bit later, but the real takeaway I want you to get is this. Most people are extremely unproductive because they don't go full force with their work. And then they don't go full force with their breaks either. When they're working, they're sneaking in interruptions and breaks. And when they're taking a break, they're thinking about work. And the result is they can't think straight. They don't have the energy they need to do their best. And they don't get that much done. But by oscillating between a give it your all, get in the zone, uninterrupted chunk of time, and then a give it your all, feel completely refreshed break, you'll feel more clear. You'll get in the flow state. And if you work for even half the time that you did before, you'll get more done. Because ultimately, you see people talk about, oh, I worked 10 hours or 12 hours or all these long days, but it doesn't matter how long you work for. Hours worked isn't the measure for productivity. The real measure is how much you've gotten done regardless of how long it takes. So decide how long you want to work in, get an electronic timer, and make sure you start doing this and see what a huge difference it makes. So you're now working in chunks of uninterrupted time. The question is, what do you work on in those chunks of time? And the answer is really simple. You work on things that move you measurably closer toward your goals. These could be things that you do every day on a regular basis or things that change based on what you're working on. But the key word there is measurably. You always need to be asking yourself, is what I'm doing right now just going to solidify the result I already have or do nothing for me? Or is it going to measurably move me closer? Is it actually going to help me get some sort of result? And I like to call this stuff 10x stuff. You want to work on 10x stuff. So stuff that will make you money or get you some sort of result. You see, Peter Drucker, the management thinker we talked about, said that business has only two functions: marketing and innovation. Everything else is a cost. And likewise, when you work, there are only one, two, or maybe three things that will give you some sort of result. If it's business, then again, those two things are marketing and innovation. And everything else is not an investment of your time, but a cost. So you want to stop seeing yourself as being productive for doing these things that are in reality a cost, but we fail to realize that that's what they are. So I really want you to think about right now, what are the high activity 10x things in your life and in your business? And as you continue doing this and you continue working in chunks of uninterrupted time, make sure to not get distracted by costs. Try to delegate costs as much as possible, or at least work on them at the end of the day. You want to focus your most productive time, the most important time, on 10x things. So keep that in mind and really ask yourself, what are the activities that pay me the highest returns? So the question is, what moves you measurably closer to your goals? And the only way to really answer that is by making a plan beforehand. You want to make a step-by-step plan for your major goals, and getting through that plan is what you do during your pre-scheduled time. And something else that's really important is you want to make sure that everything on that plan is really getting you measurably closer. Because a lot of the time, we put steps on there that don't move us in a straight line forward, but they move us just a little bit forward, but a lot to the left or the right, just tangentially, so to speak. And you really want to demand a 10x return on every step you put on your plan. And by the way, your plan could change, it could expand, but you really just want to have something to start with. And then the other thing you want to do is you want to make goals for your week, just so you have certain milestones to hit every week. The way I do this is I have a friend, we talk every week. We're very much on the same wavelength, working on similar things, and we have our little mastermind session then. And at the end of it, we share our goals for the week. So that's the time that I set my goals for the week and write it down. And the third component to really planning what you want to do are daily to-dos. So you have your overall plan, you have your goals for the week, just the milestones that you want to hit to move you closer, and also you want daily to-dos. And here's the shocker as far as your daily to-do list. Ideally, it should be only one thing. The more things it is, that means the smaller things you are working on and the less likely any of those things are 10x things. And if you have to do a bunch of small things, that's fine. But first pick the one thing that really is going to pay you the return and do all those smaller things at the end of the day. You see, you've probably heard of the 80-20 principle, that 80% of your results come from 20% of the things that you do. But you could even take that further and just demand, what is the one thing that I can do today that will give me the biggest return? You see, Gary Keller talks about this in his book, The One Thing, and he says to ask yourself, what's the one thing I could do such that doing it will make everything else unnecessary? Or another way you can ask yourself the same thing is, what's the one thing I could do such that doing it will give me the highest return for the time invested? That really is the question to determine what is on your quote-unquote to-do list. And while we're on the topic, there's something else I want to share with you, which is probably the most important thing I can share with you as far as time management goes. You see, the reason it seems like there isn't enough time to do everything you want to do isn't because there is so much to do. The reality is that time management could be so easy that you would have too much free time you wouldn't know what to do with. So why does it seem like there is never enough time to do the things you want to do? And ironically, the answer is laziness or avoidance of fear. It's like Robert Kiyosaki, the #1 New York Times bestselling author, said. He said that staying busy is laziness because you stay busy to avoid something you don't want to face. Or Tim Ferriss adds on to this idea by saying that instead of focusing on the 2 or 3 things we need to do that would make us productive or contribute to our goals, we invent things to do to keep us busy. So busy that there isn't enough time left for those 2 or 3 things we should do, the things you don't want to face. The solution then, according to Tim Ferriss, is to ask yourself frequently, am I inventing things to do to avoid the important? Or as Randy Pausch, the famous professor at Carnegie Mellon, said in his lecture on time management, asking yourself, do I really need to do this? You want to catch yourself avoiding the important and stop being lazy, and you'll create way more free time and get way more done. So when it comes to making a plan, when it comes to your weekly goals and your daily to-do list, I want you to keep this in mind. I really want you to think about what are the 2 or 3 things that will really contribute, that will move me in a straight line toward my goals. And also keep in mind that often these things push us out of our comfort zone. They're uncomfortable. They're things that we might fail at. And that's why we don't want to face them. But if you really want to be productive, if you really want to achieve your goals, not only in the shortest amount of time possible, but maybe ever, then you're going to have to face these things. So you really want to keep this in mind when making your plans. So really think about this and really try to organize what you work on by first having plans, having week goals, and also having daily to-dos, and ideally focusing on only 1 and if need be 2 things. Most people spend a lot of their time on other people's things, whether it's through email, answering phone calls, or just doing things that other people need from them. And they feel productive about it. But in reality, it's a lie. Let's talk about that in a second, but first, think about this, which is also from Seneca. He said that men do not let anyone seize their estates, but they allow others to encroach on their lives. Why, they themselves even invite in those who will take over their lives. You will find no one willing to share out his money, but to how many does each of us divide up his life? People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy. And that brings us to what I call the other 80-20 rule. You see, you've probably heard the 80-20 rule, that 80% of your results come from 20% of the work. A lot of people talk about it these days. But the other 80-20 rule that is as important is that you want to spend at least 80% of your time on yourself, on 10x things, and then only the remainder 20% or the remainder little bit on things other people demand of you, on things that essentially don't help you move toward your goals, but maybe they have to get done anyway. There's actually a famous time management theory called the pickle jar theory, which is kind of similar. So if you imagine a pickle jar, let's say you have 4 things that need to go in that jar. Let's say you have rocks, pebbles, sand, and water. If you fill up the jar with just water, then there's no room for the other 3 things. But if you start with first the big rocks, and then the pebbles, and then the sand, and then the water, you'll be able to fit all of it in the jar. And the same thing is with your time. You want to not only spend the majority of it on yourself and on important things and on things that move you measurably closer to your goal, but you want to do it first. You do that in 2 ways. First of all, you want to devote at the very least the first 3 big chunks of time to yourself. You get up, you do your ritual, you have some breakfast, which could be part of your ritual, and then you go to work on yourself. You don't spend time answering emails. You don't spend time doing things that people have asked of you. You spend those first 3 chunks of time on things that move you measurably closer. And then what you can do is schedule a 4th chunk of time that is scheduled and devoted specifically to doing all those other things all at once. And when you schedule a chunk of time to do all those things, you're then chunking all these things together. You're chunking all the things you have to do together. So you're getting them done all at once and you're doing it really efficiently. Whereas if you were to spread those out throughout the day, those could have taken the entire day. So again, it's really simple, but it's extremely important. Do your ritual and schedule the first 3 chunks of time to important things, and then schedule a 4th chunk where you clump all those things together that you need to take care of, but that don't really add value to your life, that don't give you a return on your investment. Now you know everything you need to know to be way more productive. Now let's put it all together. So what I like to do is put together an Excel sheet like the one you see here to see how well I'm doing on implementing these things that we talked about, and more importantly, to encourage myself to do them. And I think that it would be really helpful for you to do the same. So let me walk you through this really quickly. It's broken down into 2 things, the morning ritual and your work ritual, the 2 things we talked about. Obviously, in each of these things, you can do whatever you want to do, whatever works best for you. This is just a template that I wanted to share with you. Like we talked about, starting with exercise or a walk, then reading your purpose, then visualization, and something else that I think would be really helpful is reading. Something we talked about in my course, Become a Learning Machine, which is all about reading at least 100 books in a year, is creating a reading ritual. And this is something that you can do by putting it in your Excel sheet as well. And then for your work rituals, you can break it down into however many minutes work best for you. Again, this is just a template, but if you wanted to do 45 minutes and a 15-minute break, and then 45, and then have a lunch break or just another 15-minute break, and so on. And then you see here, the 4th chunk of time is devoted to doing those things that don't move you measurably closer to your goal, but you have to do. Maybe it's email, maybe it's errands or whatever it is and doing it all at once. Maybe you could do 2 of those chunks of time if you really need it. Maybe you want to do more chunks of uninterrupted time, whatever works best for you. What I've done here is put all 7 days of the week. You can just do 5 days a week. You can just do 6 days a week. It's really up to you. Anyway, I've put this Excel sheet in the resources section of this video. So download it, modify it for however works best for what you want to do, and start using it. Put a check mark next to everything that you accomplish. Build the momentum. And also you'll be able to look back and see how well you're doing. By the way, I think one reason this is so powerful is it helps you build these habits. You know, when Jerry Seinfeld had a goal that he wanted to write jokes for a full year, for 365 days a year, he printed a huge calendar, put it on his wall, and every day that he did it, he put a check mark on that day. And this is essentially what you're doing by making an Excel sheet like this as well. Now let's finish putting everything together. So this is a second Excel sheet that I recommend you use. And here's how it works. The point of it is for you to write down the measurable things that you get done every day. This is going to keep you honest, so to speak. It's going to make sure that you're actually spending your time on things that matter. Something Peter Drucker talked about in his book, The Effective Executive, is keeping track of your time and seeing how much of it is actually put to productive use. And this is kind of a twist on that. Instead of keeping track of your time, you're keeping track of how much of what you've done is moving you measurably closer to your goal. And this does a couple things. First of all, it keeps you focused on doing things that move you measurably closer. And second of all, it gives you a feedback loop that you can go back to and be like, okay, on January 1st, wow, I only got that one thing done. I thought I was so busy. Felt like I got all those things done. But in reality, this was the only thing I got done that moves me measurably closer to my goals. Let's start filling this in. Here's how it works. You've already written down your goals. So you write down your goals here on the top and the milestones for each goal that you're working on. And then here, every week, write the goals you have for the week. And then what I do here is I write the projects I'm working on within each goal. So for goal 1, I'm working on, if it corresponds, maybe it's just the same thing, but if there are different projects, you'll write the projects here. And then within each one, you write the progress that you made that day. And again, don't write things like, okay, I responded to these people's emails or I made these phone calls. What are the things, again, that move you measurably closer? So fill this in every day. And by the way, here's how I personally use this that you can do as well. Instead of 2 goals here, I have my purpose here. So let me put that in there. But I have 2 separate projects that are moving me toward that bigger goal. So I'll write project 1 and project 2, and then I'll write the milestones for each one and so forth. And lastly, what I've done is made another version of that so you can print out 4 weeks at a time. Before you start using this, just want to point one more thing out, and that is that this is built like a hierarchy. You see, you have your goals here, and then under the goals, what are the steps that you're going to need to hit along that? And then going down one step further, what are the goals this week that are going to move you toward those milestones, or at least toward that first milestone? And then you put in what are those things that are going to move you toward the week goals, that are going to move you toward the milestones, that are going to move you toward the goals. Take these 3 Excel sheets, fill in the missing pieces, print them out, and then fill them in every day as you get things done. Let these be your guide to being productive, to investing your time, and to moving measurably closer toward your goals. I hope these 2 tools are as helpful for you as they have been for me, and I hope you get a lot out of them. There's a book that I really like called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, and inside he talks about the myth of something being life-changing. We're almost programmed to look for something that's going to be life-changing. We call things life-changing looking back, but when you really think about it, most things aren't life-changing, and that is if anything is at all. Because real change doesn't come about overnight. Real change comes about by adding a single drop to a bucket of water over and over and over that when you look back on it in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, the bucket is overflowing. This concept has had such a deep impact on my life that on January 1st, I actually wrote about it. And mostly I wrote about it as a reminder to myself for how powerful this is. And you can read it as well if you like at insiderschool.com/2016 goals. But it's also the framework that this course is based on. It's based on the idea of setting up the infrastructure, setting up the framework for what you're going to do to add a single drop of water, so to speak, to the bucket every day, so that you can look back in a year and think, wow, I can't believe everything that's happened. I can't believe everything I've gotten done, versus being in the position that unfortunately a lot of people are in when they look back and say, I can't believe that nothing's changed. And I've been through that myself, by the way, which is why I was so determined to learn about time management. So quick recap of what you need to do now. First of all, make sure you set up your morning ritual. Really identify what are the things that will get you feeling at your best and things that will contribute to you being your best self. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I can definitely look back on my life and think of times when I was the most outgoing. I felt like most like myself. I felt at my best, and I could definitely think of times when I felt the complete opposite, like I was a completely different person. And the way that I look at my morning ritual now is identifying what are those things that will help me be at my best, and those are the things that I, without question, want to do every single day. So please make sure you set that up, because I think you'll get a lot out of it. And then next, really think about how do you want to structure your day. And lastly, identify what are the high impact activities that pay you the highest return, and make a plan around that.